Alright, we are doing scale drawings and maps on lesson 6-8. Your learning targets: I can solve problems involving scale drawings, and I can find the scale factor. Here's a map. On a map, we can use a scale. Obviously, a map is a small version of a real thing. So here from Morris, Minnesota to Duluth, Minnesota, it's 8 inches on my map. I want to know how far is it in actual real life. So how many miles is it? So the very first step I'm going to do is I'm going to find my scale, and I'm going to put that into my ratio box. So 1 inch on the map is equal to 50 miles in actuality. Okay, so you see that the map is on the top and the actual distance is on the bottom. On the top it's inches, on the bottom it's miles, so that makes it easy for me to know where my inches should go. So I have 8 inches as my known value, so I'm going to put that on the top because remember, we want our top values to match. So I'm going to crisscross multiply, divide by the lonely guy, and I have 400 miles. That's how far it is from Morris to Duluth, approximately. What is the actual height of the Statue of Liberty? I noticed that there is another scale here, so I'm going to put that in. 1 centimeter is equal to 20 meters. On my picture, I noticed that it tells me in this model that 4.65 centimeters is the height, so I'm going to write that in on the top because I want my centimeters and my centimeters to match. Now I will crisscross multiply, divide by the lonely guy, and I get 93 meters as my height of the actual Statue of Liberty. This is very similar to a problem you're going to have in your textbook today. It says, on the blueprint of the living room, each square has a side length of 1/4 inch. What are the actual dimensions of the living room? Dimensions mean the length and the width, so the measurements of the living room. I'm going to do the width first. Normally we'd call the width the shorter length and the length the longer one. So first I'm going to look at my key, which says 1/4 inch is equal to 1.5 feet. And I'm going to count these. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quarters, or in other words, I have 1 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so 1 3/4 inches. Crisscross multiply, divide by the lonely guy. I like to just change mine into decimals and say 1.75 times 1.5 divided by 0.25, and I get 10.5 feet, or also known as 10.5 feet. That's my width. That's one way of doing this particular problem. It's the way that you're intended to do it because of the ratio box method we're looking for you to use. But I have an even easier way of doing this. We could say each box is equal to 1.5 feet. So I can say instead one box, so I'm labeling it differently, is equal to 1.5 feet. And maybe I'll even write that as 1.5 feet so it's easier to enter into my calculator. So now I'm going to do the other dimension. I'm going to count how many boxes this time instead of counting by 1/4 of an inch. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 boxes. And when I crisscross multiply, divide by the lonely guy, I get 8 times 1.5, which is 12 feet. I find that a little bit of an easier method than using the 1/4 inch, and you could do that on your homework assignment as well. Here's another example. A model plane has a length of 7 inches. The scale for the model is 1 inch is equal to 15 feet. Sometimes you have to read to find that. What is the length of the actual plane? So my scale is 1 inch is equal to 15 feet. Put that in first. We know 7 inches. So I'm going to put that on the top next to my inches. Crisscross multiply. Divide by the lonely guy. So I'm going to take 15 times 7. And I get 105 feet. That makes sense. Try these two. Okay, so the scale is 1 centimeter is equal to 2.5 meters. I'm going to write that in on both sides because my scale is the same for both. Alright, the length of the car would be the long part of the car. The width of the car would be the shorter part. So I'm going to put my 4 centimeters in up here. For my width, I'm going to put my 1.5 centimeters over here. And I'm going to crisscross multiply, divide by the lonely guy. So on the first one, when I multiply these and divide, I get 10 meters is the length. When I crisscross multiply, divide by the lonely guy, on this side, I get 3.75 meters as the width. Second thing you need to know for this lesson is what a scale factor is. So a scale factor is a little bit different than the scale, and that's where they write the scale without any units. So here's an example of a scale, right? 1 inch equals 10 feet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change both of these to the smaller unit. The reason why I'm using the smaller unit is so that it is easier to understand. Otherwise, you're going to be dealing with a lot of decimals, and that's not fun. So we want to do it without decimals, if possible. So I'm going to take my 1 inch and my 10 feet, and I'm going to change the bigger unit. So what's bigger, an inch or a foot? I hope you said a foot. I'm going to take my feet and I'm going to convert that into inches. So I know that there are 12 inches in a foot. So in 10 feet there are 120 inches, right? So I have 1 inch is equal to 120 inches. That's saying the exact same thing as this. 1 inch equals 10 feet. 10 feet is also known as 120 inches. Once I have two sets of inches, I can take those off and say 1, and we're going to use colons to describe this because 1 doesn't equal 120, so an equal sign isn't really the correct way of writing this, to 120. Now, think of this as a fraction. If you could put this in simplest form, do that. This already is in simplest form, so I'm done. Let's try the second one. 1 inch equals 2 feet. Well, in 2 feet there are 24 inches, so 1 to 24. Can I simplify that? Nope, I'm done. In your homework, it's going to look like this. You're going to have a picture, and underneath it will show the scale. 1/2 inch is equal to 3 feet. So I'm going to actually double both of these so that I know what 1 inch equals, because I don't want to deal with fractions and I don't want to deal with decimals. So I want to make sure everything starts out, as whole numbers. So that should say 6 feet. Hopefully you can read that. 1 inch equals 6 feet. Would you agree? All I did was multiply this by 2, multiplied that by 2 to make something equal. So now I want to know how many inches are in 6 feet. So remember, there's 12 inches in 1 foot. So just multiply, and I get 72 inches in 6 feet. So I'm going to take 1 inch is equal to 72 inches. Oops, and I don't want to write it with labels. All right, we have to remember our unit conversions with centimeters and millimeters. Which one's smaller, centimeters or millimeters? Hope you said millimeters. Okay, so I want to make them both millimeters. So how many centimeters are in a millimeter? There are 10 centimeters in 1 millimeter. Sorry, 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. So this is saying the same thing. And I'm just going to write it as 10 to 20. In this example, you can simplify. I can divide them both by 10, so it's just 1 to 2. Try these two. Okay, so did you change your feet into inches to say that there are 60 inches in 5 feet? So this is 1 to 60. And here, I'm changing my centimeters into millimeters so that they're both written in millimeters. This is 30 millimeters to 21 millimeters. And again, in this case, I could simplify by dividing by 3. So I have 10 to 7. And that's in simplest form. Good luck with your NICU check.